Hey everyone, I'm Brian Hoeniger, the PDGA International Director. I just want to say a few things. First of all, I'd like to introduce all of you to Eric Xu from China. Estonia was mentioning how it'd be great to be able to share our experiences on a more international basis, where this or that country or group of people are at the leading edge of our sport. Eric is not only the leader of Yikun Discs, but he is also the leader of the China Disc Golf Center, which is our affiliated national association for China, and he's our country coordinator. He's just been in Finland for the European Open. Here he is today, learning just what all of us have learned from Team Estonia and enjoying the discussion. So there's a micro example of how we can share knowledge across the world. Quick comment about doubles. I was a 1993 doubles world champion. I watched the Swedes come from Sweden, Thomas and Frederick, and take down Climo and C.R. Willie. It was a big deal. That event was a highlight of the year, even though we were starting singles the next day. Unfortunately, what happened was the organizers of the different worlds, and of course the PDGA, decided that the worlds without doubles is a massive project in itself, and so they focus on the singles plus the mixed doubles, which is a much smaller event, and the field events, which I think are a little bit peripheral. And I think that the momentum has been lost because it's now 20 odd years, and I have told them at least twice every year, let's get divisional doubles world championships back into it, but it hasn't happened. So there's my insight on that issue. In terms of sharing with the PDGA leadership what Estonia has presented to us as, reflecting their position as one of the countries at the leading edge of technology today, just like I invited Juha Rantalaio in Finland of Disc Golf Kark, who has a real interest in seeing disc golf grow in the schools, and how do we get more organizational paths for kids to get into disc golf. I'm interested in having my daughter play disc golf. What is the path that she takes? That is his point. I told him, because he has a lot of vision on this issue, I told him, please come to the PDGA Europe Summit in Italy in early November, at which our new executive director will be at. In terms of Estonia sharing what they've shared with us today with Global, my suggestion is that we have a special teleconference with the senior staff sometime in the near future on these topics. Were you able to make the same presentations that you did today? I can tell you also in this regard that there is a paradigm shift starting to unfold in the PDGA right now. There are some new senior staff whose vision is more product oriented. It sees the organization being more driven by data and technology. It wants to put a greater focus on clubs, particularly in the USA context, because they believe that through the clubs is the path toward getting greater members. So we have some incredible talents in IT already, but I think it's mostly focused around the database. How do you run a tournament and from registration to results as easily as you can? It's way easier than it used to be, but some of these other people are new. They're supposed to be very bright, but you guys, in my experience, have just demonstrated, a knowledge of how to deliver all the other aspects of the tournament fluidly and efficiently, and therefore I will try to set up that meeting whereas you present to the senior staff in a 2 to 3 hour teleconference and sometime in the near future. As my friends at PDGA Europe know, I have been fighting to get the PDGA to think more internationally and be less USA-centric for years. It's a challenge because the sport grew in the US. When I started as international director, it was still like 92% USA. Today, it's about 75% USA. That has to go to the history in the game and the fact that the USA is a behemoth country of 340 odd million people. The lion's share of our USA staff think in terms of the USA because their work is predominantly in the USA, and delivering all the PDGA activities in the USA is a massive project every year. In order to continue the continuum to make PDGA more international, I mean, one of the key next things that really has to happen, and the new executive director, Doug Bjerkes, is aware of this and sees this. It's probably going to take a little while. It's a big step forward, but we need a global board of directors separate from a USA board of directors. A USA board of directors should be focusing on USA disc golf and the massive project that it is. A global board of directors focuses on the global and international issues, the world championships, the rules of play, the technical standards, the development of the sport in new countries.
We are here. We are one. We will fight. We will fall. We will prevail. From the fjords of Norway to the shores of Spain, from the fire of Iceland to the hope of Ukraine, 30 countries, one voice. Go Europe!
My next point, just to give you a little knowledge, so we talked about the PDGA as the global governing body has the responsibility of growing the sport in new parts of the world. Now here I'm going to talk about, we can see what's happening in Europe. This has been a project of some years, and as you can see, we have finally gotten to the point where we have a quality staff, we have an excellent board of directors, and you can see it in their schedule activities. It's still a small organization. It's 3.5 people and a bunch of volunteers. So be patient as they try to take on more responsibilities and so on. These projects that they outlined earlier this meeting are new this year. They have a lot of potential. And they have, the next point is they have potential in terms of making more people want to become PDGA members from Europe. And what I'm saying there is, people talked about, can I ask you to be transparent about an issue? Well, here's transparency about a key issue, okay? Of all the money that we get from Europe, 90% of it goes directly to funding PDGA Europe. About 7% of it goes to the current fulfillment house costs of getting the membership envelope in each of your mailboxes. That only leaves about 3%, which is roughly $20,000. Against that, we can argue, since Europe is 17% of PDGA, we have 17% of ratings costs, 17% of data costs, 17% of my wages, 17% of all the other efforts PDGA puts in supporting to Europe. And what does it mean in the end, in the bottom line, if you want to look at it that way? The PDGA continues to subsidize Europe. But we hope that through getting more members and events in Europe, PDGA Europe will continue to become more sufficient, more self-sufficient, as they are in many ways. We also, of course, when we're talking about the rest of the world, I'm not going to talk about New Zealand and Australia because they are advanced Western countries. We're talking about Asia, we're talking about Africa, we're Latin America. We have 3 distinct strategies for those places right now. In Africa, the primary effort is in the Greater East Africa area, and we are, the PMF's one of their primary partners in that area. We finance their operations there in Uruguay, in Mongolia, in Nicaragua, and other new countries. It's a great partnership. The Macbeth model is more successful than our previous Marco Polo grants model, but it costs a lot more money in order to have the impact that they are having. They spend a lot of money identifying real partners who can build and sustain the sport at the grassroots level in those countries. And in places like Uganda is the prime example, as our friend from the PMF here recently demonstrated. It's based in a place called PDGA University, which is a major sports-oriented university in Uganda. And the gentleman at the center of it, Israel Muwangusi, is a dynamo. And that is the scenario that we want to create together in more countries, because that's going to have sustainable impact. There are two major obstacles in those parts of the world. They have a lot less money available to build the sport themselves. A lot of these places, the model has been, especially through the Marco Polo program, building the baskets locally. The other thing is the discs. How did the discs get there? The discs get there by people like you and I bringing them in our duffel bags. Because when we send them there, many of these countries say, okay, it's 80% customs on this, and the people say, we don't have that money. You're asking us for $500 on this box of 100 discs, and where are we going to get that money? The second obstacle is one that was referenced to earlier in this week. In my opinion, the manufacturers are not doing enough to help to grow the sport in the new countries. There was one manufacturer who was doing some really great things in Latin America. They had a change of ownership. Change of ownership says we want to go where we're going to make more money, and so they are withdrawing from that part of the world. It's unfortunate. In Latin America, the strategy is Latin America is next to the USA, that center of the sport. It also has a common language, except for Brazil. There is a great opportunity there. We have a Latin American coordinator, and we've hired a second gentleman recently who used to be that manufacturer's Latin America representative. And we are starting to make an impact across Latin America, where we're also partnered with the PMF. But Mexico, finally, right next door to the USA, and not to mention how many Americans are of Mexican descent, and yet alone Guatemalan descent, Colombian descent. I mean, it's a huge opportunity. It's the next growth area of the sport. But it takes money to make it happen. The last area that I'm talking about is Asia. Asia is different. It does not have the close ties that Latin America does or that you do between your countries. There are two countries that are at the fore of Asia, which are run largely by Asians. China, which is emerging, has really only been involved in disc golf for 7 or 8 years, but they've got 24 courses. And my discussion with Eric the last few days in Finland has been around running the first Asia Championships, modeling after the European Championships. Asia Championships for Asian players and residents only, because we don't want Paul Macbeth or someone else coming in and wiping the table clean. We want the Asians to win their Asian Championships. It's a challenge because outside of those two countries, these countries are small dots on the map of disc golf communities, largely started by transplanted Americans who have gone to live in paradise that is Southeast Asia, to marry local citizens there, and to start a small disc golf community. But they're focused on their little place because that's what they can do. They have their lives beyond that. So we hope that the Asia Championships, if and when it happens, will attract players from across the region, but it's going to be challenging because it's expensive for them with lower standards of money in the bank and levels of living to come to China and spend what it costs for them to play to that event and then come home. So that's a synopsis of where things stand from a global perspective. I'll tell you, I'm a Canadian and a British citizen. I'm not an American, so I've been fighting the battle between the rest of the world and the USA for many years. It's gradually being won, but it's going to be one step at a time.